Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
We are here, and once again, it is our great pleasure to be in your reality. And we welcome you one and all, and you can all tell there was a good afternoon response, not quite as enthusiastic as it would be in a public event, but once again, we have with us our colleague and friend and all-around helpful person here, Mr. Khan. And so we welcome you, Mr. Khan, and on behalf of, you are right now for this frame of time, you are the questioner, the thinking audience of the world. And people are becoming familiar with your rapport with us and how we carry on. And so today it's 7/7, July number 7. 2024, and a few years down the road, July number 7, 2027, mark your calendars. It's going to be very, very interesting configuration of some sevens there. And of course, 7 is always, from our point of view, it's the signature numeral of the Pleiadians. It's been said there are 7 sisters, 7 doves, 7 chicks, and it goes on and on how we have been defined. But nonetheless, our star cluster, the 7 sisters, is known. To see a portrayal, a photo, a cosmic photo of what the Pleiades looked like, there's certainly more than 7 stars. We are a nebulae, but there are 7 predominant stars, and there are even legends that speak that from some points of view, your sun, your soul, your sun, is affiliated with the Pleiadian system, and some say it is the 8th star, or whatever. There's all kinds of lore from one end of the planet to the other. And nonetheless, we are a locale. We are, as some could say, a little empire of our own. We've often spoken of the Anunnaki Empire, and today, with Mr. Khan, the subject matter that he would like to discuss, we'll let him introduce it. Let's lay the groundwork, Mr. Khan, for where the thought processes of our listeners will go, what you have researched a little bit, and what your inclinations are as to, what's next on the agenda for people to start picturing, aside from the day-to-day chaos and tumult and lies and confusion and roller coaster ride, etc. Let's take a trip through history and tie it all into the ever-expanding now. So give us a little overview, if you would, Mr. Khan.
Thank you, Pease. Well, Pease, I'm not the first to point this out. It's been pointed out many times, but the Roman Empire went through a state of decline for many, many, many years.
Centuries.
Yes.
Centuries, yes.
And for anyone that actually looks at it, I've noticed, and others have as well, that there are some traits and characteristics that are repeated.
Oh, those darn unresolved issues. They do tend to pop up, and that's why that little ditty of a phrase there, history repeats itself, or the past is prelude to the present and future. In other words, these are old ideas, old parables, old sayings, valued, passed on so that people could remember wake up and become more astute. And just to put our listeners in the mood of remembering, because of course you all attract in your life tidbits and portions and teaspoons and swimming pools full of where you've been before, where you have connections. Sometimes it is very exciting, sometimes it is dreadful. And so a time frame. The Roman Empire from republic, from rise to decline, covered about 1,000 years or a bit less.
Maybe a bit more. I'm not sure, but about 1,000 years, let's say.
Right. For our listeners, we like to make things simple. I'd like to put you, all of you, in the time frame.
Probably the 600 BC, it was the mud huts, and then it went to brick. They became a brick empire, I'd say probably between 400 and 200, and
then it evolved quite dramatically.
Absolutely.
And then it met its demise at about, with the invasion of the Visigoths, yes?
Yes, I believe it was the Visigoths.
What would be the proper time frame?
600 BC to 400 AD?
All right, that is very good.
Well, Pease, the common traits that I see, the Roman Empire found itself fighting wars everywhere. Their military was stationed everywhere, all over the world, or the known world at the time, as is the American military.
And they formed themselves into legions, yes?
Correct.
And they learned this term from the predecessor culture that they sort of invaded and stole from, and that would be the Etruscans, yes?
Yes.
And they lived in the area of Tuscany, sort of the rolling hills of internal Italy. On a map it would be, it would be east of Florence. And there may be some listeners out there who went with us on our memorable power trip to Italy in 2003, where, well, yes, it was quite a bit of fun. It culminated with a visit to the Polish Pope at the time. Everyone had a game board with them, and, well, we weren't quite the dutiful Christians paying respects, as Rome eventually became known to be the protector of Christianity. But long before that, as you said, it was a fighting group, a building group. And what does that remind you of prior to Rome? Fighting and building. Begins with an A.
The Anunnaki?
Of course. Fighting and building. Remember. Yes, you remember them for genetics, of course. You remember them for mining, for setting up civilization. But they are big fighters, and in order to set up civilization, you must have some rudimentary understanding of how things work. Very important becomes shelter and food. And shelter can be quite simple. Think of all the people you have all over the world today that are homeless or poor, living in conditions that are not air conditioned or heated or necessarily decked out with electricity. And this is important to remember when we are talking about empires in decline, how different they all are. And even though the Romans were advanced for providing clean waters and they were famous for their baths and saunas, but they were also very famous for their debauchery. Yes, but please continue.
Well, Pease, the Romans during their decline also had a society where the gap between the rich and the poor continued to grow. their culture became obsessed with games. And
describe the sort of games that they became obsessed with.
Well,
this is not just cards and dice and things of this nature.
Well, their games involved chariot races and watching human beings kill exotic animals and kill each other in gladiatorial games. The forums that they had built seated tens of thousands of people.
That is the Colosseum.
Yes, correct.
The Colosseum is where large oval-shaped building, quite an undertaking, yes?
It's a magnificent building. They also had the Circus Maximus, where they did their chariot races.
Yes, and that was also of an oval shape. And remember, in the ancient world, you also see, you look at depictions of Rome, you see a tremendous number of columns, yes?
Yes.
Very, very large columns, like Greece, like Egypt, like parts of ancient Sumer, Babylon, long ago. Our vehicle always says, how did they build it? How did they get those columns up in the air? But once again, the prevalence of 1 and 0. All right? The round Colosseum, the round Circus Maximus, where tens of thousands, maybe 100,000 people could gather in the surrounding areas. What did they eat? Where did they do their business? Where did they sleep? But they came in droves to watch fights, gaming, slaughter. And the winner was often the one who was not killed, yes?
Yes.
Today, the winner is the one who maybe makes the most touchdowns or the most baskets or hits the grand slam. You've civilized yourself to some degree in a passion for excessive gaming, excessive entertainment. But compared to the Romans and others, your appetites are not as filled, at least in the public and what's being shown, they are not as filled with bloodlust. You understand?
Yes.
It's a very, very important word. So what are some of the other parallels?
Well, the government became bigger and bigger and more encroaching on their society.
And taxes?
Taxes went up, and that's getting me to my point. The population became more and more dependent on their government.
Yes, and they moved from what originally was what they called it a democratic republic?
No, they were a republic. They had
representation.
They had a representative republic, and a little different than what we have now, but there was representation.
Remember, it's been understood that your founding fathers, they studied all of the Roman classics and all of this. They were all from Europe. And so they were embedded in that sort of system of reality. Their roots were there. Some of them were born there. And so it was an ideal to uphold.
And the Roman Republic was somewhat radical for its time because it was one of the first representative governments. There was no king. People actually had a say in who governed them.
Yes.
Similar to the founding of the United States.
And if you study the debates that occurred before the signing of the Declaration, and then as war broke out, and then the constitutional conventions, and then finally the agreements by 1789 or some such in the early 1790s, just to give a little time frame there. A declaration once again, 1776. So the USA, just as we discuss more of the Romans and other empires, it's condensed and it's playing out these darn old unresolved issues, or repeating history, perhaps to find better ways to do things. Think about perhaps incarnating again and again, and history repeating itself, not necessarily as a punishment. People have learned to take this idea in, well, what you do comes back to you, or karma, and they think of it as a punishment. Reality is kind. Reality has a very, very challenging side, and it can give you all kinds of blowbacks and backfires and kickbacks and haymakers and knockouts and all of this to get your attention. To get your attention so that you become more aware and you make wiser choices. And even though your society is obsessed today on gaming and teams and betting and all of that, and your politics now have become games, no one's stabbing anyone in public at the Forum. The Forum is the area where in Rome that the Senate met. And it was an open area, a templed area, and it was where debates and people could come and listen and all of this. So the similarities that you are going to make in your minds, friends, as you listen, you are not doomed to repeat how history came down. When history recycles around, and you're in a whole bunch of historical spirals now that are knocking on the door of human consciousness, it is so that you have an aha. It is so that you use this vital force within you that is called the sleeping serpent at the base of your spine, the Kundalini. And there's many reasons why it has been given the image of the serpent, because it is an energy that is coiled there. It is in a ball-like form. And most people use it for survival and sexual expression. You'll find out that these two issues, as we call them, the first two chakras, red and orange, are primarily what keep you cycling in the same situations until you resolve that killing does not necessarily resolve anything at all. Once you make that resolution in your mind, you rise above this long, long old conditioning that the Romans truly embodied. So please continue with the story or our discussion here. So we talk about tyranny and taxes and government from Romans wanting to have more control, moving away from the idea of king and having republic, and then gradually power corrupt, yes?
Always.
Yes. It's sad, and it doesn't always have to happen. We want you to understand this. But in the case of Rome, yes, it has. And so it has in the case of the USA, and what you are dealing with in your own country. What kind of corruption do you see, friends, in the world that you are in government, in religion, in how money is spent? This is an issue that's occurring everywhere. It's an issue that can be resolved. So what else? What else were the Romans dealing with?
Well, Peace, to pay for these wars, and to pay for these games, and to pay for this more dependent population, the Romans resorted to debasing their money.
Define what that would mean. We are pretending we are the listeners. And the listener says, what does he mean by debasing the money?
Well, they basically began creating more and more money. And they instead
You
of
mean like Trump and Biden and all the predecessors of the presidents?
Exactly.
They just decide that they need more money.
So they just create more money.
That when a country is divided amongst itself, as Mr. Kahn will show you happened to the Roman Empire, when the country starts fighting within itself for territory, that is a big sign of decline.
The Romans resorted to taking their coinage from being nearly all silver to becoming eventually nearly all lead.
Silver. Ooh, yes, and silver in the last 5 years, or 10 years, let us say, has gone in the USA from $15 an ounce to, what is it currently, 30? Is it close to $30 an ounce for silver now, Mr.?
It's about 30, yes.
About 30, yes, all right. Silver, it appears, is needed in modern day culture for all manner of technological capacities, yes?
Yes, very much so.
In solar, in technology, in space. So it's very, very, very valuable and will become more and more valuable, and it's affordable. This is just something to think about, listeners. So they moved from silver, which is quite light in weight compared to lead.
Yes. And this happened over a period of hundreds of years.
Hundreds of years.
Not just overnight. We don't have that issue. We just, our money, people just add digits into a computer. But in any case, Pease, the pattern that occurs when the money is debased, so are the people. They end up becoming much more, I don't know the best way to put it, sexual perversion ends up playing much more of a role in their society. They also tend not to want to work, and there's just an overall degeneration of the society's moral character that can be seen as recently as the Germany in the 1920s, and in revolutionary France prior to Napoleon. So there is a connection between debasing your currency and debasing the human. I was wondering if the piece could shed some light on what exactly is going on the perhaps spiritual level with this phenomenon.
This is a very good point. In the last 6 years, 6 trillion has been helicoptered out into the U.S. economy. 6 trillion out of air. And so, it was said that we believe by the time your President Reagan came into office, it would be about 1981 or some such. 1980 he was elected, so keep it easy to remember there. The U.S. debt at that point, from beginning to 1980, was 1 trillion.
And that was a big deal.
It was a very, very big deal. And then each president thereafter bumped it up by this or that, and this or that. And each one following, including Reagan, appeared to outdo his predecessor. They started doubling and doubling and doubling. And so today the debt is 34 trillion, or to put it in perspective, is you hear it again and again on your tubes, your radios, etc. Every 3 months, or they say 100 days. Keep it simple, 100 days, another 10 there, you're in the game. It goes up by 1 trillion. So this is accelerated debasement, sort of like the old Rhodesia, Zimbabwe, and what has happened to Venezuela. These are failed countries that printed. So what is the correlation? You are, all of you, living in a real world called 3D reality, and it has many ways of interpretation and understanding, and they all have their own validity for wherever you are. But there are some choices wiser than others. This is why you have laws, but not the excessive laws today that want to rule every aspect of your life. But when you turn over a society to an authority, and the authority becomes tyrannical, then there's all manner of laws and rules, even if the tyranny comes from people that are selected and elected. More parallels to Rome. And so when there is slippage and mismanagement and lack of value, and remember, from time out of mind, from early days of this current culture finds its roots 500,000 years ago, rounded up, with that incursion, that visitation to Earth by Alalu, the deposed emperor. And his main thing was, I found gold. The other main thing is that your genetics are your gold. You are a living library. Not everywhere that you travel in the cosmos do you find the proliferation of life. Many have said Earth is in the Goldilocks zone. Not too hot, not too cold, water, sun, a perfect place. A petri dish, so to speak, in the cosmos, where life can be brought forward, that life is to be valued. And so over time, gold, silver, gemstones, emeralds, rubies, diamonds, many things that the Anunnaki valued, they became the basis of your value system. If this is needed to perform this and that, then this as a tangible thing that we can pass around. It's not a digital Bitcoin or what is the thing they want to invent now? Central bank
digital currency.
Yes. Those things, you will go down a very bad path if you get involved in those things. Even though that Bitcoin stuff looks like it's a hot commodity, if you can't hold it and you live in a world where it is important to hold things, you miss the point. So, when society destroys or cheats on its main agreement of weights and measures are needed in all cultures, primitivos to advanced, to have fair communication, trade, to develop civilization. You are growing potatoes. I am raising chickens. And so how do we decide what's fair trade between your potatoes and my chickens? Whether they are eggs, whether they are little chicks that we have hatched. And so civilization on the very basic rudimentary level of shelter and food has to have weights and measures. This is one of the first things the Anunnaki understood. They had to measure Earth. They had to survey it and geomance it and figure out the relationship of the sun, the planets. And so once it was formatted in computer terms, then things could be built in it. And within it, there had to have certain value. And people adorned themselves in replications of what the ancient gods valued, whether it was the shape of their rockets, whether it was fertility. The circle will always be a sign of the vaginal opening, the portal to replicate and hold life. A one is always the phallus. Remember that. Things are deeply embedded in symbolism, but it is through symbolism that you find yourself. When these things are no longer valued, then people can lower their own standard of morality. It's been said humans can become more animal-like. Sometimes animals have far more dignity and common sense than any humans do. But you can, when you lose your value, you start to make yourself as humans available for any kind of entertainment. Entertainment is only possible when the basics of shelter and food are provided for. So when people have leisure time because they have food and shelter, whether slaves provide it for them or through your own work and you pay for it in money, when you have extra time that you don't need to use to survive, you start to deviate. The gods put religions in so that people would have religious festivals and have some place to focus, to put their attention on a higher power. But in the physical body, it is understood that the body has its own power. Oh, there's all kinds of intelligence in your feet, and this is why reflexology is so important in terms of body work. It is understood that you have nerve endings in your hands and fingers, and the entirety of the body and the spine can be activated by the nerve endings in the feet. It's a very wonderful thing to understand reflexology and how rubbing the feet can relax and activate the entire physical form. And so it is understood that some of the ancient structures, especially in Egypt, they were built in the form of man. And you entered the temple at the feet, and then you walked up the certain halls here, and you were in the lower body, and then you came up to the torso, and then you went into the heart of the temple, and then you went into the head of the temple where the Holy of Holies was. And it was understood that as man, as humankind, that there was a divinity within all, and if you valued yourself and did the proper thing, you could follow the pharaohs whose job it was long ago to help raise the consciousness of the people upward. But even there in ancient Egypt, as in Rome and the places, you have a caste or class system. And certainly those who had leisure, who had shelter, and who had food, they could devote time to raising up their energies, but they also could devote time to sexual energies. When you start to raise your energies beyond survival and sexual creativity, meaning to make life and to value life and to have family and to however it plays out, you have to go up into power. That's the next chakra, the feeling center, and what it feels like to feel psychically out into the world. And then to the heart. The heart must be open and be connected with no perversity, no debasements. True, very true, generous, but strong. Strong. Just because you are in heart does not mean you put up with everything. In order to enter the gate of the upper temple. And many people, once they get to a certain status, well, let's say there's something called the game board. It's a very old picture, black and white checkered. You find it all over the world. It's another symbol. Black, of course, would equal 0. White would equal 1. Black equals night. white, or one equals day. And it lays out the idea that there's always going to be forces that must be understood and brought into balance. On the primitive level, men fight with women. They want to subjugate them. Today, women want to emasculate men, and they say that they are too toxic, etc. But when you unite as people and understand that there is value in these so-called oppositions, there is an understanding that when the dark forces appear, and they usually appear at a time when empire is in decline and people have forgotten their moral duty, not to gods or God or whatever, but to their own dignity, to themselves. When that fades away, then things start to move into deep decline. Cheating, lying, stealing, sexual debauchery, sex for entertainment, sex clubs. It is said that in Pompeii, that was the city that was in south of Rome, that was destroyed, what was it, about 75 AD or some such. Mount Vesuvius blew. It was said that Pompeii was the playground of popes, of priests, of all kinds of aristocracy all over Rome, where they went to have sexual pleasure. And when we visited back then in 2003, you could see on the streets there were cobblestones laid out just as they were thousands of years back. And there you have it, a big erect penis is carved in. They were good at carving things into the stone. And you walk a little further and you're at a crossroads and a conundrum which way to go, and you look around and there's a few more penises, and they are pointing you to the zone where you can find sexual pleasure. What did you say the prostitutes were called there in ancient Rome? They gathered under the archways, yes?
Yes. The Latin word for arch is fornix, where we get the word fornication.
Yes. Fornix means arch.
Correct.
And then those available, men and women. Remember, there was not just women involved. There was all manner. Once you start breaking down, anything, everything goes, including children, animals. And when it starts getting very, very bad and very dark, you know that when sexuality is no longer valued and no longer cherished, this is really when society really starts to break down, and things that are outside of the good of society are foisted to make them appear to be, well, this is okay, this is normal. And in ancient Rome, they were far removed in time from the decline of Atlantis. But one of the things that the Romans, they really exercised in terms of entertainment was the gathering at the Colosseums and other places and watching humans fight one another. Beasts, they wanted beasts, and entertainment was blood and beasts and humans and fighting and drinking and food, and well, they don't show it, but a lot of fornicating among the stands. You understand?
Yes.
One great big energy portal. Now think about it. There's the blood. There's the screaming crowds. There's the drinking. There's the food. There's the sexuality going on in the public. What kind of energy vortex is this making above the Colosseum, which is a round circle, like a big broadcasting satellite, round from the ground, from Earth to space? Catch this energy. Non-physicals?
Yes. And...
Get the picture? Yes.
But what of the Anunnaki? Do they enjoy watching societies degenerate? Do they...
Their watchers or their minions feed off of this. There are dark forces that are part of the Anunnaki Empire that feed off of wars. The Anunnaki, when you're getting into the Enlil, Enki, and the whole pantheon of characters, there's the 12, and then there's another 12 beyond them. They would be the generals. They would be the behind-the-scenes plotters and planners. They like to have strategies. They like to set up these dynamics, and often, from their point of view, their dynamics are to wipe out history. That's what they want. They want to build and then have what they have been built. They fight among each other to say, I'm going to go destroy your temples. I'm going to go into Iraq and I'm going to take over your stargates. I'm going to go into Chile and go into the Patagonia, the mountain areas, and activate all of your portals and time energy centers. So the Anunnaki, just as the records they left said that they fight for the Mies, they fight among themselves. You asked the other day that how did Jacob wrestle with God, and how did Alalu wrestle with Anu? And we suggested that wrestling is a substitute term for, well, weren't there, we don't quite understand what they're doing, but they did something that was of a conflict. And so we'll call it wrestling. You follow?
Yes.
Because wrestling was big in the Roman Empire, yes? They were wrestlers.
Absolutely.
The Greeks were wrestlers.
Yes.
Yes, it was part of their, eroticism, if we can use that term. So we've digressed a little bit, but the audience is saying, well, yes, there's a lot to think about here, and we want you all to be thinking, because you're going to have to come up with solutions. Because today, the whole world can find out about perversions and deviations and debasements. And it's not just the USA that can print money and say, well, the USA Empire, like the Roman Empire, is going to go into decline. And the Roman Empire went at one time from, well, they say from Scotland, Spain, France, yes, and then Northern Africa, Egypt, and how far into the east?
Into the east, I believe they went all the way. I think they might have gone up against China. They went very far into the east.
All right. So a big empire.
It was a massive empire.
Massive empire. And it took a long time for it to decline, to rise and to decline.
It took centuries.
USA, 2.5 centuries you are closing in on. The Anunnaki Empire in its entirety, when it was really wiped out, would have been, again, the flood of Noah 13,000 years ago. And that also, in some historical records, would also correlate with the end of the creepage of the Ice Age. And also, peoples, it is important to remember that your planet, whether the Anunnaki are doing weather control or whether it's coming out of the HARP complex up there in Alaska, or secret bases, or it's the Ruskies or the Chicoms, or it's out of Antarctica or the US, or wherever they are playing their atmospheric games. You are part of a natural world. And ice ages happen without any interference. Floods happen, droughts, And so these things big weather changes can also be a contributor to the decline of an empire.
Well, there were people that invaded due to climate changes.
Oh yes, because the Northerners, as Europe became colder, yes?
I believe it was more Asia.
Asia. As Asia became colder, which it would, of course, they said, they headed west, yes?
Yes. And they needed a place to live, and they, of course, ended up running into the Roman Empire, which was there. And this played a role in the demise of the Roman Empire.
And these were the Huns.
There was more than one group, but the Huns were very, very much involved. They, particularly a man named Attila.
Yes, Attila the Hun. Yes, this is a little history lesson for everyone, but it's important because, well, you've all lived again and again, and sometimes a name can bring up a picture in your mind. And sometimes when you get a series of these pictures, it's a good time to take a walk in the woods or to set an intention before you fall asleep, to have a dream that will unravel things, or take an afternoon off and peruse the used bookstores and see what jumps off the shelf in terms of history and historical fiction, and let yourself be led by your higher self into remembering and unraveling and understanding that yes, your world is in turmoil today, and the dangers are different from long ago. The biggest danger is that if it took millennia, many millennia, for the Anunnaki Empire to rise and to fall and rise and fall, because they had periods of extreme weather extremes, some of their own folly and some of natural cycles. The sun goes through cooling and heating cycles, and you are a product of solar activity. So many millennia could pass for Atlantean Empire, go over 400,000, 500,000 years, nearly. And then you have Sumer, which it goes way back, but it appears that Sumer was a remnant of what was built upon other areas after the flood. And the area that was there before the flood, well, that was there a long time, many millennia there. And then you are talking about 1 millennia for the Romans, and perhaps the Sumerians, they may have had, many would put them more at 7. And then now here you are, the US of A today, 2.5 centuries. So there's a little bit of a pattern here we want to correlate, that in some stretches of time one has a long amount of time to play into degradation, the rise, the glory, the fall. And then as things accelerate in terms of lessons that need to be learned, and in your time an alignment with galactic center energies that just characterizes these times, things become condensed. Just as the computers from the 1950s and 60s took up massive buildings, today people walk around with more computing power in the palm of their hands than those buildings had. So in resolving issues, raising energy and becoming more aware and coming into the old famous higher states of consciousness that always seem to elude you, yet you are entering. You are in higher states of consciousness if you can take in what we are saying. And there's no tippy top. there's cafes and platforms and great vista places and cosmic camping out there and big stuff. But there's always more territory to go when you're playing with the divine mind and finding new solutions. We want to remind you that as things look like they're falling apart, is a time for rallying for new solutions. So let's tie some more things together here. We're having a good time with this subject. What is it called again? This is going to be called When
Empires Decline.
When Empires Decline. All right, that is the discussion of today. Let's offer some more tidbits for people to remember and think about.
Well, Pease, the leadership in Rome also declined, and the people who were supposedly in charge were not really in charge, but they were put up to the job by someone else. There was this group called the Praetorian Guard. And
would they be like today's Secret Service?
Well, they'd be more than the Secret Service. They'd be the Secret Service, they would be the intelligence agencies, and they'd be the secret police, all in one.
So they were a large group, not just a few.
They were substantial in number, but I don't know how many there were. But it was a very elite group of soldiers. And they installed at least a dozen emperors. And
power behind the throne.
Correct. And it really reminds me of what we have here called the deep state. And
also parallel to what goes on in England.
Correct.
But it's more hidden in England. But there, who was it? Princess Diana and others called them the Grey Men.
I believe she also called them the reptiles.
Well, yes, there is that part of the story as well, but that goes under the hidden empire. This is about empires in decline. But to tie it together here before you carry on, we want to let you know that the empire of the rulers, the reptilian empire of the dark forces of Anunnaki who have lost their way, their empire is also in decline. And way back when we wrote Bringers of the Dawn, let's say it was put together, we channeled the information. He said the gods are trapped in an illusion, a very dark illusion. And it is you, the children of the gods, that could liberate them and help them find their way out of this unfeeling empire that they have built. So carry on, please.
Well, Pease, there was just one thing that had stood out to me about one of their emperors that they put into place. And they freely installed...
Which one, the cross-dresser?
No, not the cross-dresser. This particular one has many similarities to the current president.
You mean Nacho?
Correct. His name was Claudius.
Claudius.
And Claudius was always shunned and mocked by his family, even though he was a royal.
And what era, now year, are we talking about?
Actually, it is closer to the beginning of the decline.
So 200 AD?
Perhaps more 100.
100 AD.
But I'm not sure. In any case...
But after the character of the founding of Christianity, Jesus, after that.
After Christ, after Caesar.
Yes.
And
that could be, remember, time was reset. And
yes.
That began to be zero. But that also, from certain points of view, was 100 years before, was the beginning of the Piscean age. So remember that there's this precessional cycle that changes every 2,165 years. We'll round it up, 2,200 years. Every 2,200 years, the sun rises in a different place at the vernal equinox in the northern hemisphere. This is an Anunnaki calendar. This is another way of understanding you are in historical cycles. And so that was the beginning of an age, or the ending of an age. As Rome began to decline, so to speak, or reach its peak, and then it went over into the Piscean age and began to decline. So it reached its peak at the very end of the age of Aries. The last, let's say 500 years, if we are getting this right, of the age of Aries is when Rome rose. You
Yes.
with us?
Yes.
Age of Aries is ruled by Marduk. It's ferocious. It's warlike. Then Marduk changed characters, and it became the age of Pisces, which was still warlike, but hidden under, what did we say the other day? You're supposed to love everyone, love your enemies, forgive them. Let's say that how many people have gone to the lions with that belief system? Where did it really take them? Where did it really take them? Where do any of your, I will be sacrificed, I will give up my life for this, where does it really take you? As Rome began to fall, Christianity began to rise, who were practitioners of what was called the cult of Christianity, yes?
Yes.
Because they were fanatical. And they willingly gave their lives. And it's not the only group of people who can willingly give their lives and go into death in tremendous courage. And it's marked by the soul. But we say to you, is this the wisest choice? And our fanatical belief systems, whether they are today, one side or the other, whatever country you are in, whether it's religion or politics or whatever you are doing, things decline when people become fanatical. It's another. And when people become fanatical, you're usually talking about dark forces, and entity possession, and the person's not in the body. And when the coin is debased, the person becomes debased. When the person becomes debased, they are not fully occupying the body. And then the entities move in because of trauma, because of fear, because of sexual, just anything goes, and it becomes just big, gigantic debasements and unvaluing of all kinds of things. These contribute to every era's decline.
Well, please, I've noticed one thing that occurs when someone doesn't fight back. It's almost as if something awakens in there to the people that are watching the other person refuse to fight. It's not a normal feeling.
Response, yes.
I've witnessed this with people that have forgiven someone who has killed a member of their family. There's something supernatural that occurs.
Yes, and there are some who to this day practice the martial arts of one form or another, which are generally Eastern arts, where they understand Chi and Kundalini, as we've been pointing out, Eastern Hemisphere, Western Hemisphere. We're almost an experiment in civilization by belief systems of the gods. Remember, the gods run lots of ops on your planet. They're not all engaged in war, and there are some reptilian dragon consciousnesses that would be far removed from the Anunnaki Empire, and these may observe you from afar and have a certain energy to them that the ferocious end of the Anunnakis would not embody. We've often said this to you, there are good dragons. There are good snakes. Not every snake you see in the garden or on earth is a viper. They're not all there to harm you. That's important to remember, that in any species, in anywhere you travel, no matter what something looks like, there can be good energy and then there can be ferocious energy. The thing we emphasize is that as history repeats itself,
yes,
and as you start to see patterns and remembrances, those of you who are capable of nonviolence, you are saying that people, it's a natural instinct to fight back.
yes.
All right. And talking about Cain and Abel, they were fighters, yes?
They fought each other.
Yes. And then Cain kills Abel.
Correct.
You go back further than that, and there's a story of in the Sumerian text now, that when the Lord enters the Garden of Eden, and it's sort of Christian Sumerian blending here together, the Lord is so angry at what he saw, he cursed the serpent, and the serpent had to crawl on its belly from those days forward. You recall that?
Yes.
Our vehicle asked Mr. Boulay one time, many, many years ago, what does that mean? What does that story mean? He said Enlil was furious when he came into the garden and saw that somehow Enki had impregnated Eve. And Enlil was so mad that Enki had introduced the humans to sex, meaning these were not clones, that he cut Enki's legs off. So there you have two brothers, way back from, as we said, the foundation of your modern civilization, which is going to come through all kinds of wows and revelations by 2050, because you'll have the thrilling 30s. And, well, we'll see, maybe it's the fortuitous 40s, but you have some eras to move through ahead, and don't get yourself all fussed up about what condition you are in and how you are going to live and all that, but you need money to live. But these are very, very, very interesting times, and there's all manner of solutions, and so there are solutions to these very ancient dilemmas from 500,000 years ago up until the present time. And the governments of the world are now they are now being pushed by a one world government. It started with the League of Nations, and that was what, Woodrow Wilson or some such, and then it vaulted forward eventually to the United Nations, and well, many say unelected officials in world government, and behind it all you have the reptiles, always the dark force of the reptiles that are struggling, some of them to liberate themselves, but also there's a healing that must take place. It's been said on your planet that as people approach death, they often have to have a quick recapitulation, or as they go over to the other side, they have a life review where everything passes before them and they get to see and feel and know. And there's often regrets about, oh, why didn't I express more love? Why was I such a jerk? Why did I fight? Why did I? And so, as you were saying, there is this inclination or this desire to sort of program the amygdala, it's threat and the adrenaline and the cortisol and fight or flight. And as you learned about the Romans, if one Roman, what is the word there? Not abdicate.
Showed cowardice.
When they flee, is that what it is?
If they fled, they had a
desert. That's the word.
If they deserted, if
yes.
some group of soldiers had showed cowardice. They
For every one that did, 10 got punished.
10
Yes.
got killed.
Killed.
Usually.
Killed.
Sometimes I suppose they could have been punished, but their general practice was that 1 out of every 10 would be chosen, and the other soldiers had to beat him to death.
Yipes. And so this would be ultimate of some manner of mind control conditioning through trauma base. You follow?
Yeah.
In other words, these people obeyed because they were terrified. This is what trauma-based mind control, or MK Ultra, was all about. Mind control is the German for MK Ultra. Came out of basically World War II with the Nazis, and the Nazis had a great fascination with the occult. They're up contingent who were obsessed with power and wanted their own empire, sort of an empire of the Visigoths, returned, who then brought about the destruction of Rome in 410?
410, yes.
410 or some such. We're jumping around a bit, but this is important history. We are tying it together with some other empires so that people can start to remember, oh, I was there. And Egypt, of course, is tied into all this. That's another story about empire in decline. And it won't take a century for word to spread that Rome is no longer the great seat of power. It will take seconds if the internet is up. Ever since the activation of nuclear energy in the 20th century, and so it was being worked on in the 1930s, let's say, just to give it a pinpoint there. And about 1935, the planet Pluto was sighted. There's a correlation there between the discovery of Pluto and right around the same time atomic nuclear energy. And then you know how the story went, and it was the Manhattan Project, and they wanted to beat the Germans, and who was going to have it, and the Soviets wanted it, and there was a big push at the time to elevate things to a completely new level with this new weapon.
I suppose it's not a coincidence that one of the elements that's used for nuclear weapons is plutonium.
Exactly, that is why it was tied together with Pluto. So as that was coming into proliferation, it changed the stakes of the game tremendously. But what started to occur is that there started to be sightings. And then after the playing with this energy and the explosions in White Sands, New Mexico, and then of course, what was it called, the two bombs that were dropped on
Hiroshima and
Nagasaki. Yes, one was called Big Boy or something like that. And so you entered the nuclear age, and it was affiliated with the sighting of Pluto, which has now been downgraded as a planet and not considered a planet. But it is small and powerful, and that is what nuclear energy is. And remember, it was Alalu. When Alalu wrestled Anu and was deposed or dethroned, he fled Nibiru, according to the records, in his own spacecraft, and he brought with him from Nibiru nuclear weapons. And it was said that when he encountered the hammered bracelet, or what else is it called? The asteroid belt, yes. He nuked his way through it to make a path. Kaboom! That's how the story goes. And then he comes to Earth. So now in the last year, you've heard nuclear. Why are we in World War III? Who's got the nukes? Is it going to be Iran? Israel's got too many nukes. What are the Soviets going to do? The Chinese have nukes. Ukraine used to have nukes. of course, the U.S. has nukes, and well, there's likely nukes in Antarctica, or even weapons of a much more advanced state of consciousness, that many negotiations are being made around who is going to rule the empire of Down Under, because it appears that that one too is in decline, but that will be for another time, another discussion. So the point we are getting at is that as time is condensed, it doesn't take as long for the decline to ripple outward. This decline does not have to end in rape and pillage and Washington, D.C. and Brussels and London and all the places that have built replicas of Rome, of Egypt, of ancient Greece, the stately buildings with columns and the ones and the zeros and all of the symbolism, all of the pomp and circumstance, the glory, the beauty of Anunnaki power. Remember, the Anunnakis are builders. Yes, they like fooling around with the DNA, but they enjoy this opulence of power. Think of this dragon sitting on a throne, surrounded by all manner of wealth, of jewels, of gold. This is one aspect of the Anunnaki. It's been their downfall. Hoarding. And when you start to look at the downfall of the USA and other places, it is a time where this version of empire in the USA and around the world, it is going to be exposed. It's all doomed, and you are going to be going up in a conflagration or vaporized. There are many, many, many versions of reality. This is why today you have people saying, oh, I see this coming, and the remote viewers see this, and the data miners see this, and the psychics see this. And remember, many probs, that's a short for probabilities. Probabilities are a sort of potential future that is legitimate. They are real, but they're not necessarily fueled with the people. Many people will say, I will vacate myself from that particular playing out of reality. So part of your duty is to understand history, past, definitely, where you have been in it, and to have gratitude for having raised your consciousness in a safe and peaceful and well provided for environment where you have the leisure to become a statesperson on the cosmos, to really be a steward of humankind and of yourself and of consciousness, and to think about ways to solve these. And of course, sometimes some of the best solutions are those that come from on high, those that appear to come from the supernatural world of mass consciousness, past, present, future, higher consciousness, the forces of goodness, blending together to create some solution that does not involve killing and destruction, especially when one person turns on another. You do not have to follow the ancient pattern of fratricide or infanticide, killing of children. These things are old, embedded, unproductive ways that the Anunnaki brought to your planet. There's greater waves of dignity that can be yours. They are not necessarily utopian. Utopian then is taken over by will. Only we can provide utopia for you. No, it's all about higher consciousness meeting other forms of consciousness. It's new territory. It's new frontiers. And no matter how much you think you know about your body, or how many any energy exercises you've done, or meditations. Oh, it's brand new territory, friends. New frontiers. Because the stakes are calling for it. The cosmos is calling for it. You are on the cusp of, a new age. The age of Aquarius. And that's also for the discussion of an empire that is on the rise. There are many ways and pathways that can unfold. So, Mr. Khan, have we just about tied it all together?
I thought that was excellent piece, but we actually are probably going to have some extra time.
That's all right. Well, our vehicle's a pretty good editor. So, but we've done our share of today's beginning of the series, likely when empires decline. Yes.
I think so.
Have anything to tie things together, or shall we say, to the audience, pleasant journeys?
You could probably. The only things that I wanted to interject were Rome was also founded by two brothers. One who killed the other.
All right. So there, you tied the story together from Enlil and Ki, and then Cain and Abel.
And then there was Romulus and Remus.
Romulus and Remus, and Rome killed Remus. And they were two abandoned children that were then raised by a she-wolf, yes?
Correct.
Yes, and so that is why one of the oldest sigils of Rome is the wolf. Yes. Well, we could go on, but we'll tidy it up here. It's a lovely Sunday afternoon, and we want to say this. We know many of you miss having an opportunity to hear it. We miss all of you. When it is right, there will likely be a place and an opportunity for visitors and participants once again. But for now, we have visits with Mr. Khan, and that's as good as it gets.
And champagne.
Oh, and champagne, yes. Mr. Khan teased the other day, and yes, we did have a toast of champagne, and we believe there's an inch or two left there. So as we say, thank you, and merci beaucoup, and dziękuję, gracias, and
salam alaikum.
Salam alaikum, yes, salam alaikum to all of you, all around the globe. Danke from the Germans. So we could go on. Our vehicle has a number of languages that she knows tidbits of. But thank you for your consideration, your time, your monies, your attention. But it's your attention that we are really looking for, your attention to these matters, to rise to the occasion, to find solutions, and to be able to have the smarts enough to imagine that there's got to be a way that this can be worked out, and we'll avoid this and avoid that, and that's the reality I want to be in. And I don't have to know all the details. I just have to know what I want, and not necessarily how it is going to come about. Yes, bibbity bobbity boo. It's all up to you. So, dear friends, always a pleasure. Create the very best, and of course, enjoy the height of the summer season. And to our friends down under, build some snowmen if you have snow, and carry on, all of you. Pleasant journeys. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Okay, Peas. Good show.
Good show. How did we do, Mr. Khan?
You guys did great.